Welcome to this afternoon. I'm going to talk about a little something. Today is Monday, April 2nd, and here's what I want to talk about. I want to give credit where credit is due. Thank you, Rob Kirby, fellow Canadian. He's uncovered this information. You can get it at Kirby Analytics. You can go there. He's on. You can also look him up. He's had a show quite recently on Greg Hunter's show. Excellent. And so here's what I want to say. I'm going to try to explain this. And I've known that there's a number of ways right now that the Federal Reserve is actually trapped. They've boxed themselves into a corner. But he has uncovered one of the ways in which the Fed has boxed themselves into a corner that I didn't see. And I found it very interesting. So one of the ways that the Fed has actually boxed themselves into a corner right now has got to do with the 3-month LIBOR rate. Now here's the thing. Interest rate swaps, and we're talking about trillions of dollars worth of interest rate swaps, are tied in to this 3-month LIBOR rate. It's very critical to the derivatives market, the 3-month LIBOR rate. And as long as the 3-month LIBOR rate is down low, but when yields rise on the 3-month LIBOR rate, they have to have it so that it'll actually clear the U.S. 10-year. So as long as everything is fine and everything is good in this, as long as the 3-month LIBOR rate for these interest rate swap derivatives remains down lower so that they have a spread between the price of the 3-month LIBOR and the U.S. 10-year. When they exceed that spread, what happens is then they get what's called a negative carry. But they get that negative carry on trillions of dollars worth of derivatives. Maybe as much as $100 trillion worth of derivatives of these swaps, once that LIBOR rate goes too high. So right now, the LIBOR rate is sitting at 2.3%. Now, this chart I have here, this is the LIBOR rate. And it shows that the LIBOR rate is running at around 2.3%. Okay? But you notice how quick it's been rising lately? Now, that means that they still have a little carry there to work with between 2.3% and what the U.S. 10-year is running at right now of 2.73, I think it is, as of this morning. Okay, bring up the charts right here. Okay? So this is what the U.S. 10-year. So they've got between a 2.3 and 2.7%. But now look how this 3-month LIBOR rate is rising. In the previous chart I had on a minute ago, you seen how the LIBOR rate is rising. How long until that LIBOR rate is trying to catch up with the U.S. 10-year? So they're going to have to keep moving that U.S. 10-year up to keep it ahead of the LIBOR rate. Now there's a problem with all this. Is the housing market and stuff. These bubbles that they created in the housing market and in the auto loan market and everything else is dependent on, everything is priced into the U.S. 10-year. So they're getting to the limit of the point at which they can raise this U.S. 10-year. Now what's raising this LIBOR rate is them raising interest rates. This is what's been pushing the LIBOR rate up. This 3-month LIBOR rate. So now they've said that they're going to have 3 more interest rate hikes this year, right? This will raise the LIBOR rate, and the yield curve is falling on the other end. So the LIBOR rate goes too high, and the yield curve on the long end is not keeping up. This means that they got to raise the long end. everything's falling apart on them. Simply put, everything's falling apart on them. They've kept this game going for a long time, and they've been successful. But they finally reached, they're boxed into a corner where there's no real move for them at this point. It's almost like a chess game. You ever seen people playing a chess game and they'll play out all these moves, but in the end they get down to where their king is boxed into a corner, and like there's a queen right in front of him, and all he can do is just move back and forth between two little spaces in the end, and then the other side's coming in to box him in finally for the final move and the checkmate. We're almost to the checkmate spot in the game, in this big game. It's almost down to checkmate. We're right down to the final moves. They're making their final moves. They're getting boxed in too tight where they can't get out. The Fed. Believe me, they would like to get out, but they're not just boxed in this direction, but there's other directions too that they're boxed in. So if they allow this, if they do these interest rate hikes that they're planning, and they need to, they got to hike these interest rates. And if they do these interest rate hikes, then the LIBOR rate's going to go up. It's going to exceed the U.S. 10-year, and then they're going to have all these swaps, hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of swaps that are going to have that are going to give them a negative. So I mean, what direction are they going to go in at this point? And if they raise the long end to keep the 10-year higher than the LIBOR rate, than the 3-month LIBOR rate, if they raise the 10-year to keep it higher, then they're going to be facing a problem with mortgages and everything else that's got to do with the housing market. So we got a real problem here. I don't know what the solution the Fed's going to come up with, but what they're going to try to come up with next. But they're awful tricky. They're awful tricky son of a guns. They're awful slippery. They're slipperier than an eel. You know? But anyway, I think they are finally getting boxed in where they don't have any moves at this point. So thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye.